The gentle sound of rain filled the silence of the small apartment, each drop sliding down the window like a reflection of the tears Gao Tu tried so hard to hold back. He sat quietly on the couch, his arms wrapped around his baby, his body still weak from the pregnancy that had nearly taken his life. The child was warm, soft, breathing peacefully against his chest, a living miracle. Every time Gao Tu looked down, his heart trembled with both love and fear. This tiny being had come from him and from Wenling, the man he still loved more than life itself, yet couldn't bring himself to face. It had been weeks since the birth, yet his body still carried the scars of the battle he had fought. His back ached, his body burned, and his heart ached even more. Nights were the hardest. When the baby cried, he would rock them in his arms, whispering lullabies through tears. Each whisper carried a hidden pain, the pain of a man who had chosen silence over happiness, distance over love, and solitude over safety. He could have called Wenling, could have told him the truth, but every time he reached for his phone, guilt and fear stopped him. Wenling had offered him a future, one filled with promises, warmth, and marriage. But Gao Tu had said no. Not because he didn't want it, but because he loved him too much to ruin him. The memory of that day haunted him like a ghost. Wenling had stood before him, nervous but smiling, his hands trembling as he held a ring between his fingers. "Marry me," he had said softly, voice full of hope and sincerity. But Gao Tu had looked at him with tears brimming in his eyes and whispered a word that shattered them both. "No." He remembered how Wenling's smile had faltered, confusion filling his face. He had tried to laugh, thinking Gao Tu was joking, but when he saw the pain in his eyes, his own heart broke. Gao Tu had wanted to explain, wanted to tell him everything, that he was pregnant, that his body was already giving up, but he couldn't. The truth was too heavy, and the thought of becoming a burden to the man he loved was unbearable. In that moment, silence became his weapon and his shield. He forced himself to say cruel things, words he didn't mean, just to push Wenling away. He told him they were too different, that love wasn't enough, that he wanted freedom. Each lie cut into him like glass, but he endured it because he thought it was for Wenling's sake. He thought that if he disappeared quietly, Wenling could live freely, without shame, without the weight of an Omega's secret pregnancy. But now, as he looked down at the baby in his arms, he wondered if he had made a mistake too great to fix. The baby stirred, their tiny fingers curling around Gao Tu's thumb. That small gesture made his chest tighten, with a mix of awe and grief. "You're all I have now," he whispered softly, brushing his lips against their forehead. "And I'll protect you with everything I am." His voice trembled, his words barely audible against the sound of rain. The baby's breath was light, pure, a reminder that even in pain, life could be gentle. Gao Tu's heart filled with warmth, but behind it lingered the unbearable ache of loneliness. He often imagined how things could have been different. If he had told Wenling the truth, would they have faced it together? Would Wenling have stayed by his side through the pain, through the fear, through the long nights when Gao Tu thought he might die? Part of him believed he would have, because Wenling had always been strong, loyal, and full of love. But another part of him feared that Wenling would have been destroyed by guilt, forced into a life of sacrifice and whispers. That was why he had chosen to walk away. It was not out of doubt, but out of love. The kind of love that hurts so deeply it becomes a wound that never heals. Sometimes, late at night, when the baby was asleep and the world outside was still, Gao Tu allowed himself to remember. He remembered Wenling's laughter, his scent, the warmth of his hand on his back, the comfort of his embrace. Those memories were all he had left, and though they hurt, they also kept him alive. He would close his eyes and imagine Wenling beside him, whispering reassurances, kissing away his fears. For a few moments, he could almost believe that they were still together, that nothing had gone wrong, that love was enough to conquer everything. But then morning would come, and the illusion would fade. The pain of separation was not only emotional, it was physical. His body, weakened from the strain of the pregnancy, ached constantly. There were nights when he could barely stand, when he felt his strength leaving him when the world spun and his knees gave out. But every time he thought he couldn't go on, he would hear a soft whimper from the cradle, and that sound alone would bring him back to life. It reminded him that he had a reason to keep fighting, even when the pain was unbearable. He was no longer just Gao Tu the Omega who loved Wenling. He was a father now, and that role became his new source of strength. The baby's eyes were like Wenling's dark, deep and full of unspoken tenderness. Whenever Gao Tu looked into them, his heart broke and healed all at once. Sometimes he would whisper to them about their father, telling stories of his laughter and his kindness, though he knew the baby couldn't understand. Still, it felt right. It felt like keeping a part of Wenling close, even from afar. But the truth was, the distance between them was growing unbearable. Every day without Wenling felt like a day stolen from his heart. He wanted to reach out, to tell him everything, to beg for forgiveness. Yet he couldn't bring himself to do it. What if Wenling had moved on? What if he had found peace without him? Gao Tu didn't want to disturb that peace. He wanted Wenling to live freely, even if that meant living without him. As he looked out the window, the rain slowed to a drizzle, and the clouds began to part, revealing a pale morning sky. The light touched his face, soft and warm, and for a moment he allowed himself to breathe. Maybe one day, when the child was older, when time had healed some of the wounds, he would tell them the truth. He would tell them about the love that created them, about the strength it took to protect them, and about the man who still held his heart, no matter how far apart they were. Gao Tu leaned back, eyes heavy but filled with quiet determination. He had chosen a lonely path, but it was his path. Every heartbeat of the baby against his chest reminded him that even in suffering, love could still bloom. He had lost almost everything: his health, his peace, his lover. But he had gained something just as powerful, a reason to keep living, a piece of love that would never die. And somewhere far away, Wenling still looked at the same sky, wondering why the person he loved had disappeared so suddenly. Both hearts beat under the same clouds, separated by silence, yet bound by a love neither time nor distance could erase. Wenling stood frozen long after Gao Tu walked away. The echo of his refusal still rang in his ears, each word cutting deeper than any wound he had ever known. He had imagined this moment so many times, getting down on one knee, promising forever, asking for a chance to make things right, but he had never imagined rejection, not from him. Not from the one person whose love he thought was unshakable. As Gao Tu's back disappeared through the door, Wenling's chest tightened until breathing felt like punishment. The ache of 3 years apart had been unbearable, but this was worse. He sank into the nearest chair, burying his face in his hands. Every memory of Gao Tu played before his eyes. The laughter, the gentle scoldings, the warmth that used to fill their small apartment. He had thought apologizing would be enough, that love could fix the pain of the past. But seeing Gao Tu's eyes filled with quiet sorrow and guarded fear made him realize how much damage he had truly done. Wenling hadn't just hurt him. He had broken the one place Gao Tu should have always felt safe: his heart. Guilt clawed at him. He remembered the nights he had searched endlessly when Gao Tu disappeared, every dead end turning into a deeper pit of despair. Now, sitting there with the weight of rejection pressing on his chest, he finally understood. Gao Tu left because he stopped loving him. He left because love alone hadn't been enough to heal the wounds Wenling had caused. And now, even with all his apologies and promises, Gao Tu still carried those scars. Tears blurred his vision, falling freely down his face. He didn't care to stop them. "You said you couldn't," he whispered into the empty room, his voice breaking. "But I would have done anything to make it right." His voice trembled as he spoke to the silence, to the ghost of Gao Tu that still lingered in every corner of the room. "I would have changed everything. I would have been there. I would have never let you suffer alone again." But the silence offered no answer. Only the faint sound of the wind slipped through the open window, cold and distant, carrying away his words like a cruel reminder of how far Gao Tu had drifted. Wenling sat there for hours, lost between guilt and longing, replaying Gao Tu's trembling words. "I can't.